Last Thanksgiving, I met my grandchildren with a stopwatch in my hand and an interrogation on my lips. By sunset, my house was empty. My dinner was cold, and my wife told me she couldn't live with a sheriff anymore. It took me 84 years to realize that my authority was actually my prison. They say the scariest day in a sheriff's life is when you get shot at. That is a lie. The scariest day is when you turn in your badge, return home, and realize that an absolute stranger is sitting in your chair, and that stranger is you. I am 84 years old. For almost half a century, I wore the sheriff's star in Elko County, Nevada. I broke up armed conflicts in bars, pulled people out of mangled cars on Interstate 80, and I think I arrested at least a third of the men in our town for one sin or another. My last name was a synonym for the law. I was used to my voice making people freeze, and my subordinates catching my every word. I thought this iron authority was who I was, and I genuinely believed that happiness in retirement was just sitting on the porch and watching the sun rise over the desert, knowing the town was safe. I should have known better. Back in 1973, when I was just a deputy, something happened. We had this guy, Earl Stevens, a tough old rancher who kept the largest herd in the county. He was like Flint, a man-machine who saw the meaning of life only in work. But once, during a brutal blizzard, he went to save the calves, got stuck in the snow, and spent 2 days in his pickup truck. When we found him, he had frostbite on both hands. They had to be amputated. I came to the hospital to take his report. Earl looked at his bandaged stumps and cried, not from physical pain. He looked me in the eye and said, "Tom, for 40 years I dreamed of learning to play the piano. I always thought, I'll just pass the ranch to the boys and start. And now I can't even hold a glass of water." Right then I learned a very harsh truth. If you postpone your true desires until old age, making excuses about duty or work, you are playing Russian roulette with time. Your desires don't disappear. It's just that one day the tools to fulfill them are taken away from you. But the worst part is that I ignored this lesson myself. I gave my whole life to the system and the uniform, forgetting to ask myself what I actually wanted. I saw many ruined destinies, but the ones who fell the hardest were those who considered themselves titans. We had Arthur Vance, the manager of a huge gold mine on the Carlin Trend. Hundreds of tough men worked under him. Arthur was used to his word being the law, and his signature deciding whether a miner's family would eat meat that month. He retired at 65 with so much money in his accounts that he could have bought half of our county. Perfect conditions, right? Absolute freedom. But Arthur didn't know how to be free. He only knew how to manage. He turned his luxurious mansion into a branch of the mine. He treated his own wife, Marjorie, like a foreman. He demanded daily reports on grocery expenses, inspected the cleanliness of the kitchen with a white napkin, and set the breakfast schedule to the minute. If something didn't go according to plan, he threw tantrums that made the windows rattle. After a year and a half of this management, Marjorie, with whom he had lived for 40 years, packed her bags. She told him, "I married a man, not a corporate charter. She left him all alone in a 10-room house. One time at 3 in the morning, our dispatcher sent me to the Vance estate. The neighbors were complaining about the noise. I found Arthur on the living room floor. He was sitting in a puddle of spilled bourbon, clutching a telephone receiver. He looked at me with absolutely empty eyes and said, "Tom, I've been yelling in this damn house for an hour, giving orders, and the echo doesn't even answer 'yes, sir.' I am a nobody." 2 months after that night, his heart stopped. I learned a very harsh professional truth then. Power and status are the worst drugs because they burn out your humanity. If you are stripped of your position and there is nothing left underneath but the desire to give orders, you are already a dead man. You are just still breathing. Here's what I want to ask you right now. Stop for a second and think. If tomorrow your position, your profession, and all your achievements are taken away from you, who will you remain? What can you offer your loved ones besides money and total control? Write to me in the comments, because this question has made many of my acquaintances stare at the wall for hours. It is truly important for me to know your opinion. Arthur's death was a wake-up call for me. I swore to myself then that I would never bring my police radio and my commands home. I promised my wife, Helen, that when I turned in my gun and badge, I would just be Tom, her husband, an ordinary retiree who mows the lawn and cooks barbecue on the weekends. But when my last day on the job came and the department doors closed behind my back, I had no idea that I had brought home the worst dictator in the world, my own fear of becoming useless. My plan to enjoy happiness after retirement collapsed in the 3rd week. Suddenly, my phone, which had been ringing day and night for 40 years, fell silent. No one called to ask my advice on closing Interstate 80 or arresting a brawler. I wandered around the house like a ghost. I felt this emptiness eating me from the inside, and instead of finding a new hobby or remembering old dreams, I started doing the only thing I knew how to do flawlessly. I turned my own family into a police precinct. I began demanding strict accountability from my wife, Helen, for every dollar spent at the supermarket. I checked if her car was parked perfectly straight by the garage. But the point of no return came on Thanksgiving. Our daughter Sarah arrived with the kids from Reno. They were 20 minutes late due to freezing rain on the pass. Instead of hugging my grandchildren, I met them at the door with a watch in my hand. I gave Sarah a harsh interrogation with a raised voice, as if she were a detainee. Why didn't they leave earlier? Why didn't they check the patrol reports? Why was she such an irresponsible mother? My 7-year-old grandson got scared and started crying. Sarah didn't even take her coat off. She turned around and silently led the kids back to the car. And Helen, who had always been my reliable rear guard and never contradicted me in front of others, stepped right up to me. She didn't yell. She spoke very quietly, but every word hit harder than a .45 caliber bullet. "Tom, you turned in your badge, but you forgot to take off the handcuffs. You are trying to arrest all of us because you are sitting in the cell of your own uselessness. I am not your subordinate, and our house is not a jail. If you don't immediately find a way to just be a human being and not a sheriff, you will be left in this house absolutely alone." That conversation shattered my world. I stood in the empty living room in front of a perfectly set table with a turkey that no one would eat. I realized that with my own hands, I had just destroyed my relationship with my daughter and jeopardized my marriage. I tried to control their lives because I was too much of a coward to admit to myself, I have absolutely no idea what I want for my own. The morning after Thanksgiving was the coldest of my life. I looked in the mirror at my gray head and made the hardest decision. I had to kill the sheriff inside me with my own hands, or else he would kill my family. I got into my pickup and drove 60 miles to the neighboring town of Spring Creek, where no one knew my face. There, at the local community center, I signed up for a wood carving class. I, a man who had commanded armed squads and had unquestionable authority, sat at the same table with a few retirees and teenagers. The instructor, a 30-year-old guy in a dusty plaid shirt, looked at me and asked, "What's your name, Grandpa?" Not sheriff, not sir, just Grandpa. I swallowed my pride and answered, "Tom." I don't know how to do anything. My hands, which all my life had confidently gripped the handle of a Glock and the steering wheel of a patrol car, trembled treacherously when I picked up the chisel. For the first week, I ruined one piece of pine after another. I cut my fingers, dulled the tools, and felt like an absolute idiot. But you know what? It was incredible. For the first time in half a century, I didn't have to be flawless. I didn't have to make decisions that someone's life or freedom depended on. I was learning to be just Tom. I was learning to be a person who has the right to make a mistake. When 3 months later I brought my grandson a slightly crooked but hand-carved wooden horse and quietly, looking straight into her eyes, apologized to Sarah, I saw the tension she had carried for years fall away from her. That evening, for the first time in a long time, Helen didn't flinch at my voice, but simply rested her head on my shoulder. From the height of my 84 years, I will tell you one thing. A profession, status, the respect of subordinates. It is just a suit. Sooner or later, you will have to take it off. And if beneath that heavy suit there is nothing but orders and the fear of losing control, you will be left naked in the cold. I only managed to save myself when I found the courage to become a complete beginner in my old age and let go of my regalia. So I want to ask you right now, while you still have time, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be a vulnerable beginner, doing something clumsily but with a spark in your eyes, instead of playing the rehearsed role of the big boss or the perfect controller to death? If this conversation made you look at yourself differently, support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel, The Old Notebook. We are not afraid to tell the truth here, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Until we meet again in our notebook.